Hello and welcome to another episode of the Construction Corner Podcast. I'm Dylan. I'm your host, joined by my blue collar badass, Matt. How's it going, my friend?
You know what, man? Normally I would give you some canned response, say like, things are good, things are great, or I'd make some dumb comment about the weather. The weather sucks here, by the way. It's freezing. But things have been pretty darn stressful the last couple of weeks. So we're in a maintaining mode these days. How about yourself?
So that brings up a really interesting point. I've trained myself or tried to at least address it for everything moving forward. Is when people ask you how it's going, right? It's always living in paradise or
living the dream, man.
Yeah, it's good. Whatever, right? Some canned thing, and I've really tried to just say what's going on. So I do a lot of calls outside, walking with my dogs. I just do. And that's what I tell people. They're like, how's it going? I'm like, well, it's a little crisp this morning as I'm out here with my dogs, like going for a walk. And it's an expectation set up front in the call. Like, I'm outside. It's a little crisp. You might hear some road noise or cars or my dog's barking at a squirrel, but it's a very honest thing, right? This is what I'm doing. Same with a lot of other stuff. It's how's it going? Well, today hasn't been the best, or it's busy. I've got a lot of meetings going on, but hey, I'm here. Let's do this. And it's to be very just intentional on that, instead of a canned response on whatever, just to be frank in a way, but also to just set the stage a little better than sometimes we're used to.
Absolutely. I love it. Because there's people who will get annoyed by that honesty, right? And they get scared by it. Like, wow, that guy's being kind of a jerk, you know what? But the reality is it is honest. And okay, every day is not peaches and ice cream and rainbows and unicorns. It's just not. Some days suck. Some days are great, but just be honest with it, rip the Band-Aid off, and now let's get to business.
Yeah, it's like I'm here, it's how's it going, right? Well, it wasn't great. It's getting better. We're doing what we can, moving forward, right? It's what it is.
Equally worse, though, is the guy that always says the wholly negative response, like, oh, I'm living, or, I'm just making do. It's like, well, what's going on, buddy? Tell me. You got, 5 minutes here of rapport building chit chat. Let's get it out in the open.
Yeah. And it's just one of those things that it's an awareness, right? Once you recognize and realize that that's what you're doing, and you have some canned thing that you've been taught your entire life, and it's just it's a 2-sentence or 2-word answer, you're grunting a response. When you actually develop that into 2 sentences, now it's like, oh, that's cool. That's interesting. Or tell me, why is that, bad day?
We're all human. Yeah. I mean, we are all interesting. We have different stories to tell. Why not tell them once in a while?
And again, it's it's a 5-minute thing, right? It's not, or 3-minute deal, but for you to say whatever it is, right? Hey, I'm out walking with my dogs, right? It's a little crisp this morning, going out walking, or hey, it's a beautiful day. It's sunny and 75. Couldn't ask for a better day, right? Again, that's a 10-second clip, but it opens up a little bit of a dialogue, right? Oh, that's cool, right? They're curious, they're interested.
Yeah. Hey, what kind of dogs do you have? I have dogs. What are your dogs like? Blah, blah, blah. And it just keeps us all connected a little bit better. I have a supplier who I really like. I've worked with this guy for, I don't know, 10 years, 15 years. Every single time I ask him how he's doing, and let me backtrack. That's the kind of the flip side of it too. I'll say that a lot of times, saying, hey, how you doing? And really in my head, I'm already past that. I'm past the answer, onto the business at hand. But that's the other side. But he asked this guy how he's doing, and every single time for 10 years, he says, oh, I'm living the dream. Just living the dream, Matt. Except for now, since March of 2020, he's added to it. And I'm living the COVID dream. So it's actually quite comical now. And I'll pen them down and be like, so John, explain to me the COVID dream. What does that really mean? And it gets real quiet, and then we just get to business.
Yeah, I mean, again, those canned responses, like, because you're going to get that one guy that asks you, right? So you better have a like real answer for it.
Definitely better have a real answer. Otherwise, everyone looks foolish, and then it's just awkward and silence. And it's all good though. There's another one.
Yeah, I mean, and that it kind of leads into, again, we've been talking about core values, and I do want to touch on this, and want to touch on this right off the bat, off of our conversation with Todd last week. And just, again, guys, you can't emphasize this enough. You need the repetition. You need to know what your core values are. And you hire, you fire, you do everything based around core values, and you exude and try to live to your core values as much as possible. And again, we want to just touch on this again. Matt, you've had some experiences in the last week around core values, and maybe you want to expand upon your experiences with core values, both good and bad.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, it all goes back to company culture and personal culture, and it's not always beautiful. There's some gritty and realistic aspects of running a business that, you come across from time to time. And if you can't stay true to your values, to your culture, then you stay true to nothing. Right. So, we focus very much on our core values. We preach about them. We've got them on our walls in all of our offices. We put them on our proposals now, talk about them constantly. And we hire and fire based upon those. So we historically are very slow to hire, mainly because I don't like making mistakes. I want to make sure that if I'm bringing someone into the inner circle, that they're going to be a good fit. But on the flip side, we're very quick to fire. And I mean that respectfully, so that you could screw up seemingly anything in the company, and we'll fail fast together, and we'll learn from it, and we'll move on. But there's 5 core tenets, core values of our business that if you mess with those, it's a really easy quantitative yes or no decision for my business partner and I. And the problem that I found is the interviewing process, right? So we're both in RTA. We focus a lot on talks on hiring and questions to ask and trying to focus on core values. It's really, really hard in this course of an interview, an hour or 2 hours, whatever it may be, to effectively judge who a person is and what they really stand for. Even if you have a couple interviews or a few interviews, you don't know someone until you know them. And we ask all the right questions. We've custom tailor a lot of the questions we ask during interviews to kind of grab at, what is this person's, what are their values? How do they respond to these questions? And we make assumptions, right? The problem with assumptions is sometimes you just are wrong, and you might not really get to know someone until a month in or 2 months in or 12 months in. And, it's part of life. It's part of business, but that was kind of what happened to us last week. So we had a employee who, for all intents and purposes, has done a great job with us. They had a really bright future with us, and some choices were made, some things were said, and the long story short, that employee is no longer with us. And it's a real bummer, to put it lightly. I mean, it's devastating, frankly, to the company, to me personally. This is a guy that I hired directly. But at the end of the day, decisions were made last week, which is part of the reason that we didn't record last week. But decisions were made that it was that yes or no question, and it becomes real easy. If you can look at your values, we have 5 of them that we preach. If you can look at 5 of these values and say, okay, no, 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 wait a minute, there's something wrong here. All of a sudden you cut it loose. And that's what we did. It was a little uglier than normal. But we cut an employee loose, and we got rid of a disease, I think, that was festering, behind the covers, that we just had been either we're too busy or too stressed, or a combination of everything to really see it. We focus so much on the end result, especially in construction. We're always running. We got to get the damn building built, turn over the keys. And then you take a week or so and you breathe and you turn around and start the whole process all over again. And it doesn't leave a whole lot of time as leaders to really look inside your organization at what's going on. And I think that's kind of what happened to us.
There's so much to unpack within that. The first things that I think I want to touch on is really assumptions. So within any conversation, within any interaction, you're bringing in your own unconscious bias on whatever, right? And how you see the world, how your past experiences, right? You could have had a ton of great interactions with a lot of people, but one person did one thing that soured all future interactions when it comes to a given deal, right? It could be a contractor, a vendor, anything, you name it, right? A spouse, right? Relationships, people, have some jaded or very rose-colored glasses in any given situation. So, and assumptions are some of the hardest things to see for yourself. Somebody has to point out what your underlying assumptions are, or what lens you're looking at the world through. It becomes it's hard to see your own assumptions because you've ingrained them so much into who you are that to uncover those it's very difficult on your own. You need somebody that that knows you, but also can see through that and what your assumptions are going into situations. I know that's a very broad, big statement, but at the same time, so I'm reading a new book right now, and one of the things that they talk about is just how little we think. So how little we think about anything we do, right? You might have a lot of thoughts going on in your mind, or you're bringing in this conversation, but to actually sit in silence and think through a given problem, it doesn't happen. With a pen and paper, asking and answering questions, right? That's the process of thinking, is asking and answering questions, and nobody actually does that. So more that you can do that in your business and everything will see and help you to, without anybody else, right? If you don't have anybody or don't, trust anybody, which reanalyze that assumption or basis, but to go through and ask and answer questions so that you can uncover what some of your base assumptions might be in a given situations. So that's probably number one, is talking about assumptions.
Yeah. And I agree with you. You need to find somebody you can talk to that knows you well enough to call you on your bullshit, right? That when you're living on assumptions and they're wrong and other people can see them, they got to be willing to rip that Band-Aid off and tell you. And that's a hard thing for some people to do, but it's very necessary. We've talked about it, I think, on the show before. I've got a psychology degree, right? Not your typical construction guy. I tend to think, because of partly of that degree, that I'm usually a very good judge of character, and I can allow that to kind of cloud my normal judgment and make some poor decisions because of it.
And that's just it, right? You have to have one, you have to be willing to see it. Two, you then have to be willing to change, right? You have to be willing to deal with that, whatever it is, right? That comes out of somebody telling you that, hey, this is the assumption you're making, it's right or wrong. And then to be able to change, which also goes into, as you go through this, people will, and the experience that you had is, people will tell you who they are, right? they're going to tell you. And people, because, and I talked about this on Bridging the Gap, like it is physically painful for you to rewire your brain, right? It is physically painful for you to change, because like so many ingrained neurons and neural pathways are there that you actually rewire your brain when you do things differently. So to make that change it's physically hard. So again, people will tell you who they are. You just have to be willing to listen, willing to like see that for what it is, and not come into it with rose-colored glasses.
Yeah, you have to be able to see it, and that's a big thing, because they may not tell you who they are with words or with a direct answer that, hey, I'm this and this, but if you spend enough time with the individual, they will absolutely tell you who they are through their actions, through their mannerisms, through their body language, through their emotions, that all of the woo-woo stuff that people don't like to talk about, but it's really important stuff to be looking at and to focus on. And you're totally right about the pain of change. And I think that goes on a neurological level that, like you started off earlier saying, we don't, as humans, as our brains don't like to think a whole lot, right? We live life just based on this repeating loop. And unless we get really negative feedback on that loop, we're going to seek and do the things that we know how to do, and the ways that we know how to act. And I mean, there's books and books and books written on this, and lots of people who know far more about it and can speak more eloquently about it than I can. But it's really interesting stuff to start learning and looking at, interesting topics, but it's also incredibly powerful once you take the time to start kind of picking those pieces apart. But there's a lot going on and that we never know about and that we don't pay attention to just because it's easier not to.
Yeah. So one of the examples is, so your brain is constantly scanning for things to like be aware of, right? For change in the environment, for things to, right, fight or flight. That's what your conscious mind is constantly scanning for. So in that, you have like 40 to 60 neurons that fire every second in your conscious mind. But there's a lot of things that are automatic, right? And how you think, how you feel, how you move about the world, that are like ingrained in you from a young age. And your unconscious mind is doing most of the heavy lifting, right? So where you have 40 to 50 neurons that fire in your conscious mind, it's 40 to 50 million times, or 40 to 50 million neurons per second firing in your unconscious mind. So again, like the amount of things that are ingrained, innate, that are hardwired into you, that you have like no quote control over, is all done unconsciously, right? How you think, how you move, your mannerisms, everything pretty much about you is an unconscious thing. So it becomes very hard to change. You can, but it does take conscious, directed effort to make those changes in who you are, which all goes back to core values, that if people do not exude your core values, it's a very hard thing to change, and they're not going to fit within your organization. So you need to move them out. They'll find a place that they fit, that they're good, their intent is aligned with whatever, or a company that just doesn't care about core values, and they're going to be fine and have a career there so they don't care.
Yeah. And that's, about our now ex-employee, I personally hope it really works out for him, because he's a good guy. And it's not like he did something like murdered another employee or anything, horrid. But he just didn't fit with those values, and it would have been a disservice to him as much as it would be to us to keep him on board in that capacity. So sometimes it hurts, but you just need to make that clean cut and let the wound heal and move on, and everybody's better for it.
Yeah. And again, an organization, a company it needs to be a symbiotic organism, right? Everybody needs to work and mesh and move in the same direction together. And if you can't do that, then it crumbles. So you need to know, or you need to have that core value alignment, and that allows everything else to move in the same direction, positive momentum forward. because otherwise it just creates a clash and a cancer throughout the organization.
Yeah, and not to belabor it, but we're a small company, right? We're really small now, but there are no dark corners for someone to hide in. And some of the larger construction companies or larger any companies, you could probably squeak by with just doing what you do, staying under the radar, but not in our organization. Everybody's on a spotlight 100% of the time, all day, every day, and that's the reality of what we're dealing with here. If you don't mesh, you don't mesh, and it'll get called out sooner or later.
Yeah, and I mean it goes into building a team. This is company culture, core values. I mean that's all basically wrapped up in the same thing. And then hiring and firing, right, on bad or shitty clients, right? That's all core values related. And even one of the other things that we can go into is conflicts, right? When you have conflicts on site or with vendors, anything like that, you can still rely heavily on core values and coming back to, hey, understand. So one, you need to understand how you communicate to people and really to express that more. So, hey, this is why we're doing this. These are all the reasons behind why we need this thing delivered today or tomorrow or whatever, so we can move forward. And having those conversations to, again, not just say, I need it here or good. It's, this is why we need this. These are, the big reasons behind it. Because often in construction, it's a need to know basis where, as the engineer, right, I've become a part of a lot of conversations with the owner and why they need stuff that doesn't always get relayed to site for whatever reason. So in that, if I'm talking to like the electrical foreman, superintendent, it's like, hey, these are the reasons why we're doing the things we need to for future stubs. Or these are the connections that we need to make for this phasing to get this thing up and running, because like in a hospital setting, we need that OR running ASAP so they can start billing for it, right? They can start having patients and they can start making money on the project. It becomes okay, right? It's a light bulb moment, if you will, but they didn't have all the backstory of, hey, this is why we're doing this. This is what needs to happen. And we need this executed by when.
And I think it goes even deeper on that a little bit too, because there's a lot of instances like that where decisions need to be made and deliverables need to be delivered, finished ASAP, right? With a very definitive date for lots of reasons, whether it's financial or otherwise. But there's also a lot in construction that is very much so based on the long game, right? There's a lot of seed planting to grow forest, so to speak. And having the perseverance and the follow through to stick with things sometimes is also pretty difficult for an organization or for an individual. We're working right now on a project. It will be probably the largest project we've built to date, really, when it comes around. It's a project that I've been working on the pre-con on this thing for, I've lost track. It's literally in the 7 to 10 year mark, 7 to 10 years. So if you take me, I'm an anomaly and I'm still working on it, but we've gone through 2 or 3 different lead engineers now on the civil side. Well, now we have a guy who kind of got stuck with it, for lack of better terms. He doesn't know all the backstory. He doesn't know all the assumptions and all the everything that came into the last 6.5 to 7 years to build this thing. And so he's kind of dropping the ball in my eyes, because he just doesn't have that same motivation. And to be able to express and create the same motivation you have in someone else is incredibly hard to do, but it's incredibly powerful if you can figure it out, because it everything we're talking about is all kind of culture related. But if you can if you can express motivation, if you can express values, if you can find a way to quantify and convey difficult topics or complicated aspects of a project, it starts becoming more second nature. But that long game side of it, it's a tough one for some people to grasp onto.
Through most of this, and we always lose track of what the end result we want ends up being, right? We lose the sight of, hey, at the end of the day, whatever it is, right? Whether it's a project and this thing is going to change how the community operates. This is going to give housing to 500 people. This is going to be, the school for all of our kids for the next 50 years. Whatever that thing is, we don't always, and I know we just don't. We don't iterate that enough. Hey, this is, again, what we're here for today is to we're going to talk about a lot of detailed stuff, but at the end of the day, this is a project to, provide healthcare for however many people for the next 10 years till we renovate this thing again, right? That we're here to talk about a school or community center. It's going to provide, a place for our kids to play basketball, mine included, for the next, however many years. And that, starting a conversation like that, and hey, this is, again, why we're here, see if this fits, to see if this is going to help you and save you time, in my case, for Cowabunga. But like, a lot of this comes back to, again, why are we here? And then we can talk through all the details. But at the end of the day, this is the thing you want, right? Whether it's a saving time, whether it's a building, whether it's to do more operations, right? Whatever it is, if we can come back to why, then it becomes a lot easier, right? Now that civil engineer has a little more motivation to be like, oh yeah, no, okay, this is this is what we're doing it for. And it's just, we've been in it so long that we remember why. But it's, again, to everybody, and even in your company, right? Hey guys, we build buildings. We give new spaces to people. And this is everybody in the industry, right? This is, at the end of the day, what we're providing. For this project, it, just so happens to be a community center, or a school, or a hospital, or an office, or an apartment. But at the end of the day, it's, hey, we build great things that stand for decades.
It's just fitting in, answering the whys and filling in the whys, and then conveying them to people. And you nailed it. This guy doesn't have the same motivation. He doesn't have the backstory. And to me, I just run so fast sometimes that I'm like, well, of course he knows what it is. I know what it is. I've known what it is for 7 years. But realistically, he was kind of thrown into it, and he shouldn't probably have, he absolutely shouldn't have the same backstory on it that I do. So keeping that communication open is huge. And I think building that communication and that transfer of ideas will also help lower the collective stress levels in a project or in any sort of endeavor.
Yeah. I mean, like, I'm working on one right now. It's a hotel project, and I'm probably the fourth guy to be a part of it, and we're taking a old building that hasn't been probably had anything done with it, like 12-story hotel, or was like an apartment building. Now it's going to be a hotel. But somebody took the time to explain to me, like, one, you're not the first guy on this. Two, you need to just look through everything that's in here, because who knows? And then three, like, hey, this is the project. This is where it is. This is, we took 15 minutes to explain it. And some of it's like, okay, I get it, sure. But it's having that context that maybe in the moment seems a little boring, a little out of it, but you never know where it's going to come back to play. That is like, oh yeah, that I understand this thing that they're trying to do for that. So I need to, so we got to move a vault right in the sidewalk, because it's right on, it's in Louisville, Kentucky. And we got to move a big utility vault. And it's like, okay, how does this play in for it so that we can have wheelchair access to the building? And so that the sidewalk is smooth, and can we just fill this in? It's like, okay, yes, you need to do that, but there's got to be a little phasing here to get through. But again, because somebody took the time, the 10 minutes to explain this piece, then in a meeting I could say, hey, we need to coordinate this with utility, note this on the drawings to incorporate phasing here to end up capping manhole.
Yeah, part of it's you have to learn the art of storytelling, right? You have to be able to convey these things to people in a manner that they can understand it. And not everyone can understand the same way, right? So with an engineering background like yourself, you learn and you listen and you hear things probably very different than I do. But to be on the same team, we got to be able to tell that story so that everyone globally can get it and can hear it, and the team can keep moving forward.
100%. And so here's the hack for storytelling. It's problem. What's the problem here? What are you trying to do? Right. So like for your community center, hey, we want a place for kids to play basketball. Okay. Right. We don't have any place indoors to do that, 4-season facility. Okay. Problem. Right. Story. Well, we went through this, and this, right, to overcome whatever to create this fantastic facility. And there's more fluff in there, but ultimately it's problem, story, solution, right? At the end of the day, we're going to create a facility so that we can play basketball and sports or whatever, volleyball year round in this facility. Same with the school, right? Hey, our facilities are old and outdated, and we probably got lead in the walls. So we went through and raised a bunch of money. We feel that now is the right time to provide a 21st century education to our students and update all of our infrastructure and internet and all the things that we have to do in this day and age. So we went and raised a bunch of money, and now, in 18 months, we're going to have a brand new school, right? But it's problem, story, solution, because you pull people in with a problem, tell them a story, and then you resolve it with whatever the ending is. It's how every single movie is written, but it's problem, story, solution. Those are the three big elements in storytelling, and you could even do problem, cause, story, solution. But those are like the big elements that for anything that you do, if you start with that, you start with like the why, the problem, why we're here, which is typically a problem. Then you move into how this happened and then what you're going to do about it. Those are the simplest elements to any given story that anybody can tell, and do it in a very condensed manner.
I like that. And I think it goes back to your earlier point about sometimes you just need to take the time and be silent and think things through. Sit down with a pen and a pad and write down the whys and create or come up with what the story is.
And that's so right. Again, thinking is asking and answering questions. So what is your story, right? What is the condensed story that you want to tell when somebody says, well, what do you do? Right? You start with a problem. Tell a story.
Yep. And
give a solution. It becomes it's a very simple formula, but it does take some time to go through that exercise.
But it's important, regardless of the time it takes. It's crucially important to being able to capture vision and convey your message.
Absolutely. And it's so one of the examples, I'm going to give a non-construction example, but let's say you have an at-home chef, right? Or somebody that has their business as an at-home chef comes into your place and is a chef. So if you're at a dinner party and you ask somebody, hey, what do you do? Well, I'm an at-home chef. Cool. Right. It's it goes back to good, right? One word answer, right? I'm a at-home chef. If you switch that and say, have you ever wanted a professionally done meal in the comfort of your home? Well, I'm an at-home chef. We come in and provide delicious meals for you in the convenience and comfort of your own home, right? You start with a problem. It's a 2 sentence thing. It's a 20-second spiel instead of a 2-second grunt. And then it opens it up to a bigger conversation.
It's an elevator pitch.
Exactly. So in construction, that could be, I'm a general contractor. Somebody could have no idea what that is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how many things have you gone to and said that? And I mean, I'd say I'm an electrical engineer. Well, what does that mean? Right? Nobody knows.
Nobody knows. And especially when you specialize in things, because it's just as easy. I'll say, I'm a builder. So the first thing people think is, oh, this guy's building houses or decks and garages. If I don't elaborate, if I don't convey my message and give them my 20-second elevator pitch and tell them, they have no reason to know. And you sit there in crickets of awkward silence for a minute and then, order your food or whatever is the next thing.
Yeah. So the reverse of that, and I've been on a ton of these, right, where you intro yourself and it becomes weird because you're going to be the only person to do this, right? So everyone's in a 2-second thing and you're going to take a little longer, which is, can be perceived as annoying. But at the end of the day, people are more clear. They have clarity on what you say. So and this is for everybody out there, right? Figure out what your niche is. But if you flip it to be we build commercial facilities for, apartments or whatever your specialty is. And this is the other thing. Most commercial construction engineering firms are a jack of all trades, but you do 18. Well, you got one, we'll take it. We'll do it, whatever shit. You give us some work, we'll engineer it or build it. Right. But together. Sure. We'll take it. But if you can specialize, right? So, one of the firms that I work for specialized in primarily K-12, but educational facilities, right? So we are a premier provider of educational facilities throughout the Midwest. If you are looking to build a school anywhere, in the Midwest, we're your people, right? Or have you been looking to upgrade your educational facilities? Blank company, we're a premier provider of educational facilities in the Midwest, right? Or locationally in Michigan, in California, in Texas, whatever that is. But then it's a clear, concise pitch to say, hey, this is what we do. So it's for Schaefer, it could be, hey, or have you been looking to build recreational facilities in your county? At Schaefer Construction, we provide premier services for recreational facilities in Michigan, right? That's a pitch for Cowabunga Studios. For us, it's, architecture and engineering firms have struggled with being productive, profitable, and with their cash flow. At Cowabunga Studios, we automate electrical design to improve your financial bottom line.
It's all communication, man. I mean, this episode kind of has gone to a lot of different ends of the spectrum on topics, but communication is huge, and how you represent yourself, how you present yourself, it all boils down, I think, to what your background is and what your values are, right? To keep going back to that, and trying to succeed as a group, to reduce levels of stress, and to get your message across so that you can sell your software product, or so you can build the next building, or you can, whatever you want to do, whatever you need to do to succeed as a team or as a unit. These things all tie together in this kind of swirling pool, if you will, that it's tough to figure out sometimes, for sure. And we make stupid mistakes a lot of times, and, stress comes in real big. And especially if you don't understand what's going on, maybe the message wasn't conveyed to you clearly enough. You didn't know who you were hired. You didn't know what company you were going to work for. You didn't know what project you were taking on, or all of those kind of meat and potatoes of our existence. It can really lead to some mental turmoil.
100%, man. And in construction, I mean, heck, in a lot of industries, but especially construction, I've seen it time and time again, is you run from one deadline, from one project to the next. You're worried about a lot of things that are more than likely out of your control, on getting information and making timely decisions that you just don't have the right information. And I mean, you just can't let it go. You're worried about something that you have no control over. And if we can let some of those things go, which again, it's easier said than done, but in that you can get a lot of comfort, but also to take 10 minutes, 5 minutes. And I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but to take 5-10 minutes in your car, even before you go into the office, and to be quiet, right? Just to sit there, close your eyes, and just be. And it's some of the hardest things you could do, but in that, you will feel much better.
Just remove yourself from the situation for a minute and try and see it differently. And I can tell you a story about me personally. This happened yesterday. So obviously the last week and a half has been incredibly stressful. There's a lot going on now because of some things that happened that we've already talked about. I personally don't always tend to just take that step back. I'm running constantly. I'm trying to steer the ship. I'm trying to do everything. So yesterday was about the apex of it. I was literally like head spinning, stressed out. I was accomplishing nothing. Nothing was getting done. The stuff I was doing was wrong, or it wasn't effective. And I went as far as to get in my truck. I left my office. I had a walkthrough for a new prospect. Got in my truck, drove an hour on a day that I'm literally scheduled so tightly, there's no room to breathe, it feels like. So I drive an hour all the way across town. I get to the location, pull in, and there's a couple trucks in the parking lot. I'm thinking, this is interesting. I tend to get places early. I'd rather be early than late every time. So figure I'll just, hang out for a minute. People will show up. Well, no one's showing up. So I get out of my truck and I walk into the building. It's a addition and renovation project. And as I'm walking in, I pull out my paperwork and I look at it on it again. And the damn walkthrough is for Thursday, tomorrow. So I literally took, and when it's all said and done, about 2.5 hours out of my already crazy, stupid day and just threw it out the window and spent 2 hours in my truck just pissed off at the world now. But had I just stopped and just taken that minute to just shut everything off, back up a minute and breathe and really see what's going on, I probably would have saved a lot of gas, a lot of headache, and a lot of extra stress that I didn't need. So you can talk about it all day long, and we talk about all these great ways, but even as someone who talks about it and who preaches all these coping mechanisms and ways to still succeed, it still happens to me. I still spent 2.5 hours yesterday for no good reason other than the fact that I was so stressed out that I didn't actually pay attention to the smallest of details or the biggest of details in that occasion.
And I mean, dude, thank you for sharing. Like, those things they're not uncommon, right? They're not uncommon across the industry, and so many people dealing with, I mean, heck, I got shingles, right? Like from stress. Like it is a common occurrence across the industry to be so burnout that, often it manifests in health conditions and bad things, right? But it can be these little things too, right? Just time wasted for not looking at it, or to compulsively obsess over something that you have no control over, right? On a deadline, even on a thing that you're not getting the right information to make a decision. Well, until that comes, like, there's nothing you can do, right? It's obsessing about what ifs. And, I used to be that guy. Like, I'd obsess, like, oh, if this happened, well, we need to do this, this, and this. If that happens, we need to do this, this, and this. If this thing with no probability of happening ever occurs, well, we need to do this, this, and this. You freak out about like, well, at the end of the day, like, make a decision when it happens. And you do need to put some plan, some thought before that happens. But most of the time you can get the information, take a step back, and then make an informed decision later. You're not making a call in the room. Rarely does that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a time and place for quick decisions, but for the most part, especially when it's project related or workflow related, you've got time. You always have more time than you think you have. That's for definite. Actually, the first time I went deer hunting, that was the piece of advice the guy that took me gave me. And he said, just remember, no matter what you think is going on, you always have a little bit more time than you think you do. And it holds true in a lot of facets of life, I think.
For sure, man. We've covered a big gamut today. We've talked, culture, core values, and really that, comes into your clients and building the team and conflicts, even somewhat in old versus kind of young construction and some cultural differences. We're kind of coming up on I think a good point for this episode, but any closing words or any thoughts you want to add to this, big topic of of communication?
Yeah, and it's related to kind of the stories that I told today, but it's a quote from Abraham Lincoln I read recently in a book, and the quote is that most people are about as happy as they make their minds up to be. And to me, that kind of hits the nail right on the head about dealing with stress, about culture, about community, about everything we've talked about today. So that one kind of struck a chord when I read it the other day.
Yeah. I mean, which goes, so Henry Ford had one that says, if you think you're right or you think you're wrong, you're right. Right. Or if you think you can or if you think you can't, you're right.
Yep.
Which, I mean, it all goes back to thinking. And this is going to be my wrap up is, guys, you need to spend some time thinking through things, right? Asking and answering questions, being silent, trying to remove the stresses, the trigger points in what you're doing, and trying to think through, can you actually make a decision, right? Do you have enough information to make a decision on whatever it is, right? Design, construction, workflows, whatever. Can you make a decision on it? And if you can't, ask for the information and then wait, right? There's nothing you can do. And just be okay with that. Be okay with not moving, because probably not moving is going to be a better decision than doing something and having to rework it, right? Going back to making assumptions, guessing, all those types of things that it doesn't help anybody do anything. So take the step back, take some time, get out a pen and a piece of paper and write your thoughts down, in silence, put the phone away and ask and answer good questions. And that'll get you further than just about anything else we've talked about.
Great advice, Dylan. Great advice, man. We'll see you next week.
All right, guys, that's this episode of the Construction Corner podcast. Until next time.